In the vast and eerie world of the unknown, there are countless tales that blur the line between reality and nightmare. Tonight, we explore two chilling encounters that defy explanation. First, we journey with a traveler whose solo road trip takes a terrifying turn under a starlit sky. Then, we follow a young couple who discover that the peaceful countryside can hide the most terrifying secrets. These are stories of encounters with the unknown, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, and fear takes on a form beyond our comprehension. They don't realize it yet, but they've just entered the realm of Mr. Scary Guy. Prepare yourself for a journey beyond the ordinary, into the shadows of your deepest fears. Welcome to the world of Mr. Scary Guy. I've always considered myself a rational person. I work as a civil engineer, and my life is built around facts, calculations, and evidence. But last summer, everything I thought I knew was shattered by an encounter that still haunts me. It started when I decided to take a solo road trip across the Midwest. The idea was simple: a break from the daily grind, some time to clear my head, and maybe even rediscover a bit of the adventurous spirit I'd lost over the years. I had been working long hours, and my life had become monotonous. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. I needed something to shake me out of that routine, something to remind me that there was more to life than just the grind. The plan was to drive from Chicago to the Rocky Mountains, with a few stops at small towns along the way. I wanted to take my time, see some new places, and maybe even find a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. One night, after a long day of driving, I found myself in a remote area of South Dakota. The sun had set hours ago, and the road ahead was a ribbon of darkness stretching out into infinity. The stars were out, twinkling brightly against the clear sky, but there was something about the night that felt different, an almost palpable tension in the air that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I decided to pull over at a rest stop to get some sleep before continuing my journey the next morning. The rest stop was deserted. Just a small parking area with a couple of picnic tables and a bathroom. It was the kind of place you might pass without noticing during the day, but at night, it took on a more ominous tone. I parked my car and reclined my seat, trying to get comfortable. The night was eerily quiet, the only sound the occasional rustle of the wind through the nearby trees. I closed my eyes, letting the exhaustion of the day lull me to sleep. I'm not sure how long I slept before I woke up with a start. Something had changed. The air felt thick, charged with static, and there was an uneasy stillness that hadn't been there before. My car's radio, which I had turned off before sleeping, suddenly crackled to life, emitting a low, humming noise. It wasn't like any interference I'd ever heard, more like a distant, droning chant, almost hypnotic in its rhythm. I sat up, trying to clear the fog from my mind, when I noticed something strange. The sky, which had been clear when I fell asleep, was now filled with a soft, pulsating light. It wasn't the moon or stars. It was something else entirely. The light seemed to be coming from directly above my car. I stepped out of the vehicle, my heart pounding in my chest. As I looked up, I saw it. A massive, triangular craft hovering silently above me, its surface smooth and dark, with lights along its edges that glowed a deep, otherworldly blue. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to get back in the car and drive as fast as I could. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, rooted to the spot by a combination of fear and awe. As I stared at the craft, a beam of light shot down from its underside, bathing the entire area in an unearthly glow. I shielded my eyes, but the light was so intense, it felt like it was piercing through me, reading every thought, every memory. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the light vanished, and the craft began to move, slowly at first, then faster, until it shot off into the night sky at an impossible speed, disappearing without a trace. I stood there for what felt like hours, my mind struggling to process what I had just witnessed. When I finally gathered the courage to move, I stumbled back into my car, shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't stay there. I needed to get out, to get as far away as possible. I drove through the night, not stopping until I reached the nearest town. I checked into a motel, locked the door behind me, and collapsed onto the bed, my mind spinning. I wanted to believe it had been a dream, a trick of the light, anything but what I knew it was. A close encounter with something not of this world. In the days that followed, I tried to forget, to bury the memory and return to my normal life. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that craft, felt that light, and heard that low, humming noise. I started having strange dreams where I was back at the rest stop, but this time I couldn't escape. The light would engulf me, and I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart always accelerated. I noticed other changes too. My phone and electronic devices started acting strangely. Random glitches, static on calls, and sometimes they would just shut off for no reason. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something had followed me from that rest stop. One night, about a week after the encounter, I woke up to find my bedroom filled with the same pulsating light I had seen in South Dakota. I shot out of bed, my heart hammering in my chest, but when I looked outside, there was nothing there. The light was gone, and the night was still and silent. I started researching alien encounters, hoping to find some explanation, some reassurance that I wasn't going crazy. I found forums and websites filled with stories from people who had experienced similar things, people who had seen strange lights in the sky, who had encountered beings that defied explanation. I reached out to a few of them, hoping to find some comfort in their stories, but instead, their tales only deepened my fear. They spoke of recurring sightings, of strange marks on their bodies, a feeling as though they were being watched, even abducted. One man, who had experienced something similar to what I had, warned me that the encounter was just the beginning. "They know you've seen them," he said, "and once they know, they don't let go. They'll keep coming back until they get what they want." His words sent a chill down my spine. I had never believed in aliens or UFOs before, but now, I couldn't deny what I had seen. I couldn't deny the changes in my life, the fear that gripped me every time I looked at the night sky. Weeks passed, and I tried to move on, but the memories wouldn't leave me. I started to avoid being alone, especially at night. I couldn't bring myself to go on another road trip, and even short drives after dark filled me with anxiety. Then, one night, it happened again. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I felt the familiar static in the air. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my heart began to race. I didn't want to open my eyes. I knew what I would see, but I couldn't stop myself. The light was back, pulsating softly, filling the room with its unearthly glow. This time it wasn't just outside. It was in the room with me, and I could feel its presence, as if something was standing right next to my bed, watching me. I tried to move, to scream, but I couldn't. My body was frozen, paralyzed with fear. I could hear the low, droning hum again, vibrating through my skull, and I knew that whatever was there wasn't going to leave this time. I don't know how long I lay there, trapped in my own body, unable to move or speak. It felt like hours, but it could have been minutes. All I remember is the overwhelming sense of dread, the certainty that I was about to be taken, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The light vanished and I could move again. I bolted out of bed, my entire body shaking, and looked around the room, but there was nothing there. The night was silent, and the only sound was my ragged breathing. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just sat there staring at the door, waiting for something to come through it. But nothing did. Morning came, and the light of day brought with it a small measure of comfort. But the fear lingered, a constant weight on my chest. Since that night, I haven't had another encounter, but I know it's not over. The fear is always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I avoid being alone at night, and I haven't gone on another road trip since. I've even moved to a new city, hoping that distance might keep whatever it was away. But deep down, I know it's only a matter of time. I know that they haven't forgotten about me, and that one day, the light will come back, and this time, I might not be able to escape. I've never told anyone about what happened that night, and I doubt I ever will. Who would believe me? But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. And I know that we are not alone. When my wife Ashley and I decided to buy our first home, we wanted something simple, somewhere we could escape the chaos of city life. We found a quaint farmhouse nestled in the rolling hills of rural Pennsylvania. It was perfect, secluded, surrounded by nature and far from the noise and bustle we were so eager to leave behind. We had been searching for months, visiting countless properties, but nothing felt right. Everything was either too close to the city or too expensive. We were starting to lose hope when we stumbled upon the listing for the farmhouse. It was everything we had been looking for. Affordable, in a beautiful location, and full of charm. The house itself was over a century old, with creaky wooden floors and a wraparound porch that looked out over acres of farmland. It needed some work, but we were excited about the idea of fixing it up, of making it our own. The idea of owning a piece of history, of living in a house that had seen generations of families come and go, was thrilling. The first few weeks in our new home were idyllic. We spent our days fixing up the old house, planting a garden, and exploring the surrounding woods. The nights were peaceful, with only the sound of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl breaking the silence. It was exactly the kind of life we had dreamed of. But that peace didn't last. It started with strange noises in the middle of the night. Soft, rhythmic thuds coming from somewhere outside the house. At first, we dismissed them as animals or the wind, but the noises grew louder and more frequent, until it became impossible to ignore. One night, I woke to the sound of Ashley's voice, frantic and scared.
Michael, do you hear that?
She whispered, shaking me awake. I listened, and there it was again, a low mechanical humming, unlike anything I had ever heard. It seemed to come from all around us, vibrating through the walls of the house. I got out of bed, very nervous, and grabbed the flashlight from the bedside table. "Stay here," I told Ashley, though I could see the fear in her eyes. I stepped outside, the cold night air hitting me like a wall. The humming was louder now, and I could see a faint light emanating from behind the barn. I crept towards it, the flashlight shaking in my hand. As I rounded the corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, hovering just above the ground, was a small, metallic object, saucer-shaped, with glowing lights that pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. It was maybe 10 feet in diameter, and it emitted a low, almost musical hum that sent shivers down my spine. I stood there, frozen in place, watching as a hatch on the side of the craft slowly opened. A beam of light shot out, bright and blinding. I shielded my eyes, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. Inside the light, I could see figures, small, humanoid shapes moving towards me. Panic set in. I turned and ran back to the house, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I burst through the door and slammed it shut behind me, locking it with trembling hands. "Ashley, we need to leave. Now!" I shouted, grabbing her hand and pulling her towards the door. We ran to the car, not daring to look back. As we sped down the dirt road, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the lights rise into the sky, disappearing into the darkness. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town, where we checked into a hotel and tried to catch our breath. The reality of what had just happened was overwhelming, and we both knew that going back to the farmhouse was not an option. The next day, we returned with a moving truck, packed up our belongings, and left that place for good. But as we loaded the last of our things into the truck, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the strange light again. But there was nothing, just the bright morning sun and the quiet countryside. Once we were back in the city, we tried to put the experience behind us. We found a new apartment, closer to our old life, and settled in. But the fear lingered, a constant shadow over our lives. We didn't talk about what had happened, not even to each other. But I could see it in Ashley's eyes. She was just as terrified as I was. I started having nightmares, vivid and terrifying. In the dreams, I was back at the farmhouse, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped in my own body, while the light filled the room, and I could feel something watching me, studying me. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, but the fear wouldn't go away. It stayed with me, long after I was awake. Ashley was affected too. She became withdrawn, quiet. She stopped going out, stopped seeing friends. It was like a part of her had been taken that night, and no matter how much I tried to reach out, she kept pulling away. Then, strange things started happening. Electronics in the house would malfunction. Lights would flicker. The TV would turn on and off by itself, and our phones would lose signal randomly, even though we were in the middle of the city. At first, we tried to ignore it, to brush it off as coincidence, but it became more frequent, more unsettling. One night, about a month after we left the farmhouse, I woke up to find Ashley standing at the window, staring out into the darkness. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Ashley, what's wrong?" I asked, getting out of bed and walking over to her. She didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. Her gaze was fixed on something outside, something I couldn't see. I looked out the window, but there was nothing there. Just the quiet street, empty and still. "Ashley," I said again, gently touching her shoulder. She finally turned to me, and I could see tears in her eyes.
"They're here.
She whispered, her voice trembling.
They found us."
A cold chill ran down my spine. I wanted to tell her she was imagining things, that it was just a nightmare. But deep down, I knew she was right. I could feel it too, that same sense of dread, of being watched, that I had felt back at the farmhouse. We didn't sleep for the rest of the night. We just sat there, huddled together, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The night passed in eerie silence, and when morning came, the fear seemed to dissipate, as if it had all been a bad dream. But we knew it wasn't over. We could feel it in the air, in the way the house creaked and groaned, in the way the lights flickered at odd moments. We were being hunted, and it was only a matter of time before they came for us again. A few days later, I came home from work to find Ashley gone. Her phone was still on the kitchen counter, her purse by the door, but she was nowhere to be found. Panic set in, and I searched the apartment from top to bottom, calling her name, but there was no response. I called the police, and they searched the area, but there was no sign of her. It was as if she had just vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and still no word. I was beside myself with fear, unable to eat, unable to sleep, constantly waiting for the phone to ring, for someone to tell me they had found her. Then, one night, about a month after she disappeared, I woke up to the sound of her voice.
"Michael?"
She whispered, her voice soft and trembling.
Michael, help me.
I bolted out of bed, my heart pounding, and ran to the window. There, standing in the middle of the street, was Ashley. She was staring up at the window, her eyes wide with fear. But there was something wrong. Something about her didn't seem right. I ran outside calling her name, but as I got closer, I could see that it wasn't Ashley. It looked like her, but there was something off about her eyes. Something cold and empty. She reached out to me, her hand trembling, and I could see that her skin was pale, almost translucent.
Help me.
She whispered again, but her voice didn't sound like Ashley's. It was hollow, mechanical, like a recording being played back. I took a step back, my entire body shaking with fear. "You're not Ashley," I said, my voice trembling. "You're not her." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind her, something metallic and inhuman. Then, without warning, she lunged at me, her hands grasping for my throat. I stumbled back, tripping over the curb, and fell to the ground. But when I looked up, she was gone. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I was too afraid that if I closed my eyes, she would come back, that she would take me like they had taken her. A few days later, I packed my bags and left the city. I moved to a different state, changed my name, tried to start over, but the fear never went away. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, hear her voice, and I know that one day they'll find me again. I've tried to forget, to move on, but I can't. I know that what happened that night at the farmhouse wasn't just a nightmare. It was real, and it's still out there waiting for me. I don't know what they are or what they want, but I know they won't stop until they have me too. Thanks for joining me for another night of terror. As we've seen, the unknown can be closer than we think, lurking in the quiet moments and the familiar places. Remember, the darkness has eyes, and sometimes what you don't see is more terrifying than what you do. This is Mr. Scary Guy saying, until next time, good night.